I want to start with these latest efforts to resolve this conflict diplomatically. We understand that the United States is now saying that it is preferred to lift some oil sanctions against Iran. These negotiations are continuing through mediators in Pakistan. What can you tell us about this?
Well, the Trump regime is showing some flexibility, but it's not nearly enough. And the Americans are going to have to go much further than that in order to be able to convince Iran that a deal is possible. So as things stand, the gap between the Iranian proposals and what the United States is now willing to offer is still very great. And I think that because of that, the chances for renewed U.S. and Zionist aggression against Iran are quite high. The assumption in Iran is that a major attack will probably take place within the next few days, and it could happen at any moment.
When you say the Americans have to go much further, what are the sort of baseline concessions that Iran is looking for?
Well, obviously, this was a war of aggression. The United States murdered many thousands of Iranians, 3,400, 3,500 Iranians, many school children, many little girls. They've destroyed Iran's infrastructure. They bombed bridges. They bombed pharmaceutical factories. They bombed universities. In my city, in the city of Tehran, they bombed multiple faculty buildings in different universities, and they've done so elsewhere. So the damage that they've done is quite significant, and they will have to, and Iran will demand reparations. That is inevitable for an agreement ultimately to be agreed upon. And then there's, of course, the issue of Iranian sovereignty, assurances that the United States will no longer threaten Iran with aggression. And there has to be a regional peace. There has to be peace across the different fronts. That, of course, in particular includes Lebanon, but also Gaza. So we are very far from where we should be. The United States wants the Israelis to be allowed to slaughter in Gaza and Lebanon and to get away with it. For Iran, that's not going to happen. There won't be a deal if the slaughter continues. And of course, the United States is going to have to accept Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. That is not something that Iran will compromise on. And Iran's right to have a peaceful enrichment program, a nuclear program, that is also something that Iran is not going to negotiate.
Now, as you say, the view in Tehran is that the United States and its ally Israel could attack within the next few days. Well, if we look at what's been happening over the last few days here, the Axios news site is reporting that the president, that's President Trump, met on Saturday with some of his national security team. He spoke on Sunday by telephone with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's expected to convene another meeting of his national security team in the Situation Room here at the White House in Washington on Tuesday. In the meantime, one of his closest allies in the United States Congress, Lindsey Graham, had this to say on a television talk show. Let's listen.
I would encourage the president look at reducing Iran's military capability even further. They've been dramatically weakened, but they're still targets that could weaken them more militarily. And I would also keep the embargo on to weaken their economy. And I'd let the Iranians know if you keep terrorizing the region, Cargill, which is your source of revenue, will be in play. I think that would be the smart next play. The energy infrastructure is their soft underbelly. If you go back to the fight, I'd put energy on top of the list.
So, Dr. Marandi, if you listen to people like Lindsey Graham, they believe that there is a military solution to this, that the United States has the capability to capture key Iranian assets. What do you make of that?
I don't think he really believes that. I think that by now they all recognize that they lost the war. Lost the 39-day during the 39 days of. Remember, on day 1 or 2, Trump demanded unconditional surrender, and 1939, he was forced to accept Iran's 10-point plan as the framework for negotiations. And the siege is not going too well either, is it? Because the global economy, thanks to the behavior of Trump and Netanyahu, is moving towards collapse. So this siege warfare is a double-edged sword, and it seems that the side that's facing the United States and its allies is sharper than the side facing Iran. Time is not on the side of the United States, and it's not on the side of Netanyahu, who is probably the ultimate decider here for war. And the reason is simple. If time was on their side, they wouldn't be pushing for a new wave of aggression against Iran. But Iran's military capabilities are strengthened. Iran is more prepared militarily today than it was at the beginning of the war. And the United States capabilities have been depleted to a significant degree. But one final point that I should mention, and this I think is key, if Iran's critical infrastructure is destroyed, then the critical infrastructure of all those countries in the Persian Gulf that are proxies of the United States will be utterly destroyed. And that will lead to a global economic meltdown, a global depression far worse, in my opinion, than what we had in the 1930s. So Iran is not going to pull any punches.
What do you make of the United States strategy, almost a dual strategy, on the one hand of indicating that it believes that there is a diplomatic solution, and on the other hand, as I've just mentioned, with all these preparations taking place here, that it will still attack Iran? And in support of that, we're also hearing that there's been quite a buildup of United States warplanes in Tel Aviv, in Israel.
Yes, that's something that we were expecting all along. We, from the very beginning of the ceasefire, were expecting the United States to relaunch this war, because at the end of the day, we have to go back to Joe Kent's resignation letter, the former head of counterterrorism and the Trump appointee. You don't get much higher than him in U.S. intelligence. Only one person perhaps is higher, and that would be Tulsi Gabbard. He said that this war is about the Israeli lobby. It's about the Zionist lobby in the United States. It's not about the nuclear program. He said there's no nuclear weapon. It's not about an Iranian threat. He said that's non-existent. So in reality, it's because there are people who are making decisions in the United States whose priorities are Israeli regime and not that of the United States. And the Iranians don't believe that foreign influence has melted away over the past 80 days.
What do you make of what is now a very open public realignment on the part of the UAE with Israel, joining Israel against Iran? I mean, there have also been reports that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the UAE and that Israel has agreed to supply the UAE with its Iron Dome technology.
That couldn't have been a more destructive decision. There couldn't have been a more destructive decision than to announce this relationship. The Netanyahu regime threw Mohammed bin Zayed under the bus, and it's probably because he wanted. It was probably because of his own internal political concerns, but the Israeli regime is so despised across the region and across the world that any association with it demolishes a country's image or a leader's image. Mohammed bin Zayed has now exposed himself across the region and across the world as a Zionist proxy, as an ally of a genocidal regime. And that's why he tried to deny the trip to the UAE. But it's not going to work. So what they have done is that they have the soft power, Iran, they have soft power capabilities, because increasingly people see that these regimes in the Persian Gulf are indeed, especially the UAE, closely affiliated with the Israeli regime. But the UAE is in no position to wage war against Iran. If it comes to blows, I think the end of the UAE is something that can easily be envisaged. If, as I said earlier, if Iran's critical infrastructure is targeted, that will be the end of the UAE's critical infrastructure. And we know what the weather is like in June, July, August in the UAE. And it's intolerable. It's too hot and too humid, and everyone will have to leave. The regime will collapse.